And we are following major breaking news out of the NBA. The Nets have fired head coach Steve Nash after 2+ seasons there in Brooklyn. He was hired back in 2020. This was his first time as a head coach, did not have any coaching experience in the NBA. Went 94-67, but were swept in last year's playoff following a year of Kyrie Irving drama. A tumultuous season followed that, with Kevin Durant demanding that Steve Nash get fired. And this season, a 2-5 start, resulting so far in Steve Nash losing his job. Jacques Vaughn will now take over as interim head coach. Steve Nash issuing his own statement. You can see it here. It is lengthy, but in part thanking the Nets, saying it was an amazing experience with many challenges that I am incredibly grateful for. It was a pleasure to work with the players, performance team, and front office every day. I'm especially grateful to my coaching staff and video room, who are a talented group with so much character and professionalism. He goes on to thank the Brooklyn fans. Let's welcome NBA insider and writer Bill Ryder here. Bill, look, we heard Kevin Durant before the season began. He wanted Sean Marks gone. He wanted Steve Nash gone as well. He ended up staying there. Your initial reaction to Steve Nash gone after just 7 games into the season?
Yeah, Amanda, you said it, that Kevin Durant got what he wanted, as stars tend to do, and that when things go badly for whatever reason, there's a myriad of reasons things in Brooklyn have not gone to plan, it's always going to be the head coach who is the person, fair or not, who pays that price. The betting markets had shifted in the last few days for Steve Nash to be by far the most likely guy to be the first NBA coach this year to lose his job. It's not a surprise. It's probably not incredibly fair, but it certainly reflects a Brooklyn Nets organization that's been nothing short of a disaster this season.
Look, before he got hired as the Nets coach, Steve Nash is someone who is very beloved around the NBA. From what you know, what was going on behind the scenes with him as head coach? I mean, where was there that much headbutting between him and the players? What led up to this?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's go through all the... First of all, the losing is the primary thing. But why are they losing? Why are they underperforming? Well, Ben Simmons certainly has not worked out and is suddenly injured again, not able to play. Even when he's on the floor, he was more of a punchline than he was a basketball player. We have talked about a bunch, and certainly it's been covered, Kyrie Irving and the off-field ugliness that's been a distraction for this team. And Amanda, I think you hit on the biggest component here, and there's several. Kevin Durant tried to get Steve Nash and the GM fired in the offseason. The fact that Joe Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, did not do that didn't mean there wasn't going to be pressure, ugliness, a bad locker room dynamic, as sources have explained to me. I don't know if this was inevitable, but it was certainly very likely Steve Nash was never going to survive this season, even if things went okay, because when your superstar doesn't want you there and his best friend Kyrie Irving probably in connection doesn't want you there, it's hard to survive in the modern NBA as a coach. You throw in the fact that they're not winning basketball games, they don't look very impressive. I think you add all that up, and that's why Steve Nash is no longer the coach in Brooklyn.
You have 3 very strong personalities here. You have a lot going on with each of these individual players, a lot going on the past year with all of these players, and then before that, adding James Harden to the mix. I mean, is there anybody that would have survived that?
I'll say this. I don't think there's anyone that was likely to succeed in this environment, especially this season, Amanda. Now, I could be wrong, but my view before the season, now, and for the remainder of the season is that this Nets team is going to be wildly underperforming and underwhelming as they're currently constructed. I've never thought Kyrie Irving, that the juice was worth the squeeze since that shot he hit against the Warriors several years ago in the finals. That's clearly more true today. Kevin Durant's outstanding, but he needs help around him. He is not much of a leader when things are going badly, and Ben Simmons has obviously been a misplaced bet by that front office. Now, could someone have survived their job? Yeah, I think if it's a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving hand-picked head coach, someone who had their support, I don't think they'd be more successful. I do think they'd probably be a little more positioned politically to keep that job. Amanda, remember, if I could take you way back, when Steve Nash got hired, Kyrie Irving went on a podcast and said, we don't really have a head coach. That's far from an endorsement. I mean, Steve Nash, in my opinion, and talking to folks close to the situation, has been undermined at every step, and really every part of this Nets team has been undermined at every step by bad luck, by injuries, by their own on and off field activities, by decision making like bringing in Ben Simmons. So no, I don't think anyone would have succeeded, and I think few people who weren't selected by these 2 stars would have survived this job.
So Jacques Vaughn taking over right now. I'm going to get to the coaching search here in a minute, but going back to the players and Kevin Durant speaking out against Steve Nash, he is now gone. He also talked about Sean Marks. He is still there. Are we looking at potentially him losing his job as well?
I think there's no doubt that Sean Marks is absolutely under massive pressure. It's hard to get into the brain, into the mind of a billionaire NBA owner, but we know in sports that when a GM fires his hand-picked head coach, it's often because there's massive pressure, and it's probably the right decision, and there's a deflection that's at play here. And whether Steve Nash was technically fired or he stepped away, whatever the actual circumstances, yes, Sean Marks is under massive pressure. He's under massive fire. And I think more so than Steve Nash should be held to account because, and I think he's a great GM and an impressive guy, but Amanda, this was a Nets organization that had a young core several years ago that was overperforming, that was building a really impressive culture, and they traded all that away. I get it. We all get it. For Kevin Durant to bring in Kyrie Irving, eventually for James Harden who became Ben Simmons, and that's clearly been an absolute mess. It's not like they had nothing to build on for the future. It was Marks who made that bet. It's not paying off. I think he's certainly under a lot of pressure.
Whether it was Harden or Simmons, we have never seen these big three work together there in Brooklyn. I mean, it feels like between the front office and the players and these individual players and all their personalities and off the court stuff that's going on, I don't know if these puzzle pieces are ever going to fit together. You have Jacques Vaughn taking over right now as interim head coach. What do they look for in their next head coach? Can you get a head coach to work with these three guys to make everything work?
I mean, it really depends on your previous question. What is the long-term job security of Sean Marks? And if it is Sean Marks who's going to be here making the decisions, what is it that he envisions for the future of the team? Is Kyrie Irving a part of this team long-term? Is Kevin Durant, who's under contract obviously for several years but wanted to leave in the offseason, here long-term? I think it depends. If the answer is yes to one of those two questions, they want Kevin Durant there long-term, he's under contract. They want Kyrie Irving there longer. He's not going to be under contract, but they could certainly change that. You go and you get a head coach, let's be frank, who's approved by Kevin Durant and or by Kyrie Irving. If there's a rebuild coming, if there's a reset coming, if there's some recalibration that doesn't involve one or both of those guys, then you probably cast a wider net and look for the head coach who you think's the guy. And I'll throw in someone who can manage a locker room is going to be important given what we've seen. And because Steve Nash didn't work out, someone with coaching experience or at least NBA assistant coaching experience, which Nash didn't have, probably going to be very valuable here as well.
We could spend probably an hour, maybe all day, talking about the Nets and trying to figure out exactly how to make this team work or not. Let's talk about Steve Nash, though. As you mentioned, no head coaching experience, no coaching experience before taking this over here. What's the next step for him? Do you think we see him continue coaching, or he's like, you know, that was good enough for me?
I think it's a bit of a break, and I think you said at the start, this is a guy he's a beloved figure in the NBA. He's incredibly well respected, and I think it's that the comparison I'm going to make is an imperfect one because I'm going to compare him to Ty Lue. Ty Lue obviously had assistant coaching experience at a high level, but I don't think it was easy to make an evaluation of Ty Lue when he coached LeBron James, because if it went well, and it did in Cleveland, Ty Lue was going to not get the credit LeBron got. That's just the way it works, and if it went badly, Ty Lue would have gotten the blame. I don't think we know, and I've asked a few GMs, it's been several weeks, maybe longer, their analysis of Steve Nash as a coach, and the answer was, it's kind of hard to tell. Don't know if they're running his offense. Those are hard guys to manage. Kevin Durant doesn't really want him there. I think Nash will probably get the benefit of the doubt that whatever happened in Brooklyn didn't reflect his level of coaching ability, and he'll get another chance, because I don't think it's been easy to make a real evaluation on him, given the fact that this was Kevin Durant's show and Kyrie Irving's show, and really a three-ring circus that I'm sure was very hard to manage.
Bill, at the beginning of the season, despite the odds for the Nets, they were quite high to go ahead and win the NBA championship. You said, no, this is not going to happen. And sure enough, we have seen what has happened thus far with the Nets. We'll talk to you very soon. Bill Ryder there. Make sure to check him out on social media for all the very latest in the NBA. Taking a look at the Nets under Steve Nash there, things just getting worse for him by the season. Not so much from 2020 to 2021, but 2-5 to start, with a lot of issues both on and off the court for the Brooklyn Nets. Big breaking news out of the NBA. The Nets have fired their head coach, Steve Nash, after 2+ seasons there in Brooklyn. Was hired back in 2020. Did not have any coaching experience in the NBA. When 94-67, they were swept last year in the playoffs following a year of a lot of Kyrie Irving drama there. A tumultuous offseason followed after that. We had Kevin Durant demanding that both Steve Nash and GM Sean Marks be fired. That didn't happen. The Nets so far starting the season 2-5. Steve Nash now losing his job. Jacques Vaughn taking over as interim head coach. Let's welcome in Avery Johnson joining us on phone to talk about the firing of Steve Nash. Avery, you were the former head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. You played alongside Steve Nash. Before I dive into any specific questions, just overall, your reaction to him losing his job there as head coach.
Well, my reaction is I'm not necessarily surprised. This was something that was discussed in the off season, obviously, when Kevin Durant took his stance when he supposedly wanted a coaching change and a change in the front office for him to return to the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets didn't cooperate with the request. Kevin Durant returned to the team, and things haven't gone well. Not because of Kevin Durant, but overall the team has been in disarray. They haven't been very competitive on a defensive end at all. Kyrie Irving still remains somewhat of a distraction off the court and on the court. Ben Simmons, still doesn't want to, from an offensive standpoint, and I know they're saying they got to give him some time, but offensively, still a guy that really doesn't want to look at the basket. So they've had a couple of different storms come their way, and then Steve Nash just seems like, he just couldn't push the right buttons with this team, and subsequently it led to a parting of ways.
Avery, a lot of people are going to say it was the players that led to Steve Nash getting fired. Yes, you have a 2-5 record, but you see winning seasons prior to that. I'm curious, from when you were coaching to now, how much is different in that the players dictate what's going on with their head coach?
It's significantly different because the players have so much more autonomy. They have such a stronger voice. Social media also has a significantly large voice. So it's a different climate. It's a different era. Fans obviously have different modes of communicating. And then you gotta sell tickets. It's a big deal when you have those. You're playing in a $1 billion stadium, and a lot of the folks that pay some of the significantly large dollars for those suites and ticket packages, and then sponsorships of teams, and if they're not happy and their customers are not happy, it's just a whole different world right now. You got the NBA; they're going to be signing a new TV contract here sometime soon. That's going to affect local TV markets also. So it's more of a comprehensive situation, and because of that, I don't think Steve Nash got fired just because he lost a game. I think it was a comprehensive look at the entire totality and the culture of the Brooklyn Nets franchise and the players and how they function on and off the court.
Saying that then, we saw Kevin Durant call out Sean Marks as well during this offseason there. He is still there. How much is he on the hot seat right now?
It's hard to say. A lot of times coaches, and I've been in this situation, a lot of times the coach is the first one to get let go. And, and even if the coach and the GM walked in the door together, how many times have we seen that the GM survives and the coach is unable to survive? So this is a different situation where when you fire a coach, it seems like the GM always survives. So we'll see if this is going to affect Sean Marks. Obviously, the GM picks the players and with ownership. So we'll see how much this impacts his job security.
Avery, for the past handful of seasons, there's been so much hope for this Nets team. First it was KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, and then James Harden turned into Ben Simmons. It has not been able to come together at all so far. Is there a coach you can bring in to make this trio work? Or what is your concern level for the Brooklyn Nets right now?
My concern level is high. You can bring in Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, who's not available. You can bring in any of the legendary coaches. You still have to take a significant look at how this roster is constructed. And one of the biggest areas that you have to take a serious look is Ben Simmons. How is he going to function, especially on the offensive end? Because a lot of times the Nets are just playing 4 against 5 defenders because he's not a threat offensively. Sure, defensively he'd be very competitive. Now, he hadn't played basketball in a year or two, and, He's got to get back in the flow. But who's going to be able to push that button to make him somewhat of an offensive threat, even if it's at the basket? So you got to take a look at this roster. But then I think you got to bring in a former experienced head coach, somebody that can bring the discipline that's all a little bit defensive minded. I think the Nets are scoring enough points to be competitive, but defensively, they're very inept defensively. So you're going to have to bring in an experienced NBA coach that has a track record, that's going to be able to have a respect that when he walks in that door, the first day he walks in that door, he's going to command respect.
Avery, really quickly, last question here. I'm curious. You've coached in the NBA. Obviously, you were a player for a very long time. There are some cities where if you're a coach in that particular city, you feel like you're on the hot seat all the time, and it's a little bit more difficult than it is in other cities. Is Brooklyn a place like that, having been the head coach there?
Yes, because of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the roster. Now, if you know, when I was coaching the Nets, the expectations weren't as high because we were in a total rebuild. I had taken over a 10 or 12 win team, bunch of young players on the team. We were just trying to, you know, hit the reset button and kind of get the team and the program reorganizing back on the positive level. But when you have a Kevin Durant that doesn't have many years left, he doesn't have a 10-year run left. He's coming from a championship situation with the Golden State Warriors. They handpicked a lot of the players, and you're in New York City with a team that was predicted in a lot of polls to potentially be the representative of the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals this year. There's tons of pressure, and you're always under fire.
Avery, I lied. I have one more question. It's pretty simple. Will the Brooklyn Nets have success this season?
On who they hire as the next coach. If they can turn the page in terms of their defensive strategy and system, and if Ben Simmons gets to a point where he could basically be a threat of averaging a triple-double, and obviously that requires scoring 10 or more points.
A lot of ifs. We'll see what happens. Avery Johnson, we appreciate it, former head coach of the Brooklyn Nets and the Dallas Mavericks there, who played alongside Steve Nash. Coming up, we'll continue to follow this breaking news. Steve Nash losing his job with the Brooklyn Nets. You see worst records in the NBA so far this season. The Nets right there sitting at 2-5. We'll see if they can turn things around, moving forward with their new interim head coach in Jacques Vaughn.
Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ, where we are following some breaking news out of the NBA. The Nets firing head coach Steve Nash just about 7 games into the season. Jacques Vaughn will take over as the interim head coach. Even though it is early on, we do want to take a look at Steve Nash's career with the Nets as head coach. Fired after a 2-5 start for this season, but looking back all the way to 2020, not looking so great, especially in 2021 to 2022. Now, we do want to bring in our NBA writer, James Herbert, to talk more on this breaking situation. So, James, you are in New York. You go to every game. Just curious, what was the chatter behind the scenes? Were you hearing anything leading up to this? Is it something that you were expecting? Were you surprised?
I was a little surprised today, but not in general. I mean, I was at the game the other night where, the first Pacers game where Nash called it a disastrous loss. He was pretty hard on the team afterward. But even before he came into the press room, like the reporters in there were talking about how long he took to get in there. He's usually extremely quick after games. And they were actually saying that the last time they remembered waiting this long for a coach was the last game that Kenny Atkinson coached for Brooklyn. He also ended up being fired after a win, or parting ways with the Nets after a win. The Nets called both of these mutual decisions. I'm not sure if the coaches legitimately feel that way, though. But yeah, there's been obviously a ton of drama around this team. I've seen it all. I've got this Jared Allen Garden Gnome here behind me. And Steve Nash has been through a lot. This team got off to a really rough start. It had really high expectations, and I think everybody sort of understood that he was going to be up against it and that the Nets would have to come together fairly quickly for him to get a chance to continue leading this team, and it hasn't happened so far. It might be a little bit early for some people's taste. I'm not sure this was a super fair decision to him given everything that he's dealing with, but the reality is this was a team that is still talking about competing for a championship. Ben Simmons said after that loss to the Pacers that he still thinks this can be the best team in the NBA.
And James, what do you see moving forward with the team? You talked a little bit about the big personalities they have there. What are the plans, especially with the roster? Are they going to blow it up? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think you would do this if the plan was to blow it up immediately. Like, this feels like a last-ditch attempt to salvage the season to me. I think they'll try to make some changes, try to balance the rotation out a little bit. There should be some improvement naturally if guys can get healthy and stay healthy. We'll see how that goes. Ben Simmons is about to miss another game tonight against Chicago. Seth Curry and Joe Harris didn't have healthy off seasons and are still working their way back to being every night players for this team, and they're like huge role players for Brooklyn. So it's a team that over the past few years, really the entirety of Steve Nash's tenure, has had zero continuity, has almost never been fully healthy, and has always been trying to build chemistry. Whoever walks into this position, whether Jock Vaughn finishes the season out like he did after Kenny Atkinson left, or whether it's a new voice, those problems aren't just going to go away, and the task doesn't really change. It's fix the defense, which right now is second last in the NBA, figure out a way to maximize everybody and get everybody involved on offense. Steve Nash has been pretty direct about what he wants this team to look like this entire time. He wants everybody to be a threat at all times. He wants it to be a cohesive system where everybody makes each other better. But a lot of the time, the product on the floor hasn't totally reflected his basketball values. I mean, you see possessions that just die after the first action. You've seen a lot of iso ball, particularly this season, even though they installed a brand new offense, which at times has looked good in the preseason. I thought it looked good, but they just have not been able to have this sustain into what they were looking for. So the next coach has basically that same responsibility.
And James, I want to talk about the next coach and moving forward. Obviously, we know that Vaughn is the interim head coach there, but a lot of big personalities in that locker room. KD, Kyrie, a lot going on, especially with Kyrie right now. A lot to handle. Who do you think would be someone that could kind of, I don't want to say control the locker room, but be able to handle that for the next head coach there for the Nets?
I think ideally it's Jock Vaughn. I don't think they would trust him to do this if they didn't feel like the players did respect him and trust him. And I think you just have to see how the first few weeks go and see if there's a connection that's made and see if he can sort of leave his imprint on the team. Maybe it's a change in rotation. Maybe it's a change in defensive schemes. You had seen Nash already move a little bit away from the two big lineups with, I should say, two non-shooter lineups with Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton out there together. Maybe you do want to just completely separate those guys and not start them together. But then again, if the biggest problem is defense, and it clearly is, then I don't even know if that's the answer. But I mean, a lot of this also is simply effort. And if Nash's message wasn't getting through to the players, if ownership, if the front office determined that that was the case, then maybe they don't have to make a ton of rotation adjustments. Maybe they don't have to make a ton of schematic adjustments. I mean, I was at shoot around yesterday where Markieff Morris said the phrase, "It's all effort," when talking about the problems with Brooklyn's defense. And it got a little bit better last night against Indiana. It still let the Pacers come back in that game, and they had to pull it out down the stretch. But maybe that was a modicum of progress, but clearly not enough to save Nash's job.
All right, and that is our NBA writer, James Herbert, joining us here, recapping that breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Thank you so much, James. And if you're just joining us, the Nets have fired head coach Steve Nash. They have Vaughn in as the interim. Quickly looking ahead at the Nets defense so far this season, kind of in the bottom half of the ranks for everything across the board. That is what their defense looks like so far this season in 7 games against the Nets parting ways with head coach Steve Nash. Stay with HQ for more on this. We'll be following it throughout the day.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.